Okay, are you confused about this Ukraine call? I am confused about this Ukraine call, but I think I've sorted it out. The big takeaway here, the 30,000-foot view, is that Democrats and the left are totally misplaying their hand here. Okay, that's the political takeaway. And this is not surprising because they totally misplayed their hand on Russian collusion for 3 years. They totally misplayed their hand on Stormy Daniels' campaign finance for 3 years. They totally misplayed their hand on Brett Kavanaugh's allegations, that he was a super duper gang rapist or something. They totally misplayed their hand. Okay, they have very little in the way of facts. That's the common thread here. They had very little on facts in Kavanaugh, on Stormy Daniels, and on Russian collusion, on that Steele dossier. They have very little in the way of facts here about this phone call, okay? What they have a lot of is innuendo. So they could actually use all of this to raise questions. Even when we found out that they were hoaxes, the Russia hoax, the Kavanaugh hoax, the campaign finance, I guess, is still unresolved, but it's going nowhere. They could use that innuendo to raise questions. Is Brett Kavanaugh fit to be on the Supreme Court? You don't want to pursue it too much because the more you dig into the facts, the more you realize Kavanaugh is totally innocent. Did Donald Trump collude with Russia? Is he a traitor to his country? Is he corrupt? Is he crooked? You don't want to dig into it too much because you dig into it with a 2-year Mueller investigation, you find out he's totally exonerated on conspiracy or collusion with Russia. But if you just raise the questions and you play it a little soft and you play it a little subtle, it actually could have worked to their political benefit. That's what could have happened here with this phone call with Ukraine. If they didn't call for impeachment, if they didn't call for investigations, if they just said, here's more evidence that Trump is corrupt, he's willing to abuse his power, and we're not going to impeach him for it, but if they just used it to paint a picture, it could work possibly to their political benefit. But they can't do it. They can't underplay it. Instead, every single time they have to overplay it. They have to say Trump didn't just have connections to people connected to Russia. He's working for Moscow. And you say that's obviously not true. We know that that isn't true. Brett Kavanaugh didn't just party when he was in high school and college. He's a rapist. You can check these things. That isn't true. Donald Trump didn't simply try to twist the Ukrainian president's arm to get him to look into a political rival. He's colluding. He's breaking the law. He's abusing his power. And now you're going to do investigations and you're going to find out more and more about what Trump is asking about, which doesn't raise questions really about Trump. It raises questions about Biden, which the Democrats, if they had 2 brain cells in their head, would want to avoid because Biden is currently their best chance at beating Trump and they're torpedoing his campaign. What are the details here? The details are so bizarre, it will leave you scratching your head. The details look so bad for the Bidens that you can't help but wonder why on earth would you call attention to this? The Biden campaign or Democrats in general? Here are the details. I guess the main thing you got to know is that Joe Biden's son Hunter is a complete degenerate. Now, we're not talking about Joe Biden's son, Beau, who died of brain cancer. Beau was sort of the upright Biden son. He was Attorney General of Delaware. He looked like he had the political future ahead of him, and he tragically died a few years ago. We're talking about Hunter Biden, who is a derelict degenerate. He was discharged from the Navy 1 month after receiving his commission. Why? Because they found he tested positive for doing a bunch of coke. His wife left him for squandering money on drugs and hookers. You can read that in the court documents. In 2016, Hunter decided to start sleeping with his dead brother's widow after spending a week buying crack in downtown LA. Someone pulled a gun on him while he was buying crack in downtown LA. He kept going back there. All of this attested to. All of this has been well reported on. The romance didn't last very long with his late brother's widow, and he dumped his brother's widow pretty soon thereafter. Now, on that same trip to LA where he was buying crack and getting guns pulled on him, he got into a fight with somebody at a Hollywood club. A man named Baby Down, I assume that's not his Christian name, I assume that's a nickname, Baby Down drops Hunter off at a Hertz rental car office. Hunter takes the rental car from Hertz, drives it to Arizona. The cops catch up with him after the Hertz staffers call the cops when Hunter Biden leaves the office. The cops find a crack pipe, a bag with a white powdery substance, a Secret Service business card, Hunter Biden's license, and a badge from his brother's time as Attorney General of Delaware. They find all of that on the car. What happens to Hunter Biden? The cops declined to press charges. They just didn't have enough evidence, is what they said. There's a hallmark of Hunter Biden's life is again and again and again, he gets off because his father is a prominent politician. That's just a little background on this guy. Now, what does that mean for the dealings in Ukraine? It actually tells us a lot about the dealings in Ukraine. So what happened in Ukraine is a few years ago, Ukraine's top prosecutor was looking into a money laundering scheme by a company called Burisma Holdings. This is a classic crony company, an oligarchic type company in Ukraine. Hunter Biden, for some reason, was on the board of Burisma Holdings and being paid $50,000 a month. It's a lot of money, $600,000 a year. What was he being paid all that money for? Was he being paid all that money for his expertise on Ukrainian energy? The guy who was getting pinched for buying crack in downtown LA, sleeping with his brother's wife, and his own wife leaves him because he squanders his money on drugs and hookers. That guy, that's the guy who has such expertise specifically in Ukrainian energy that they pay him $600,000 a year for his expertise. Yeah, maybe it's that, or maybe it's that he was peddling his father's influence because his father was the top diplomat at the time, right? His father's the vice president, and he's handling a lot of negotiations with Ukraine. So what happens then? The prosecutor is looking into Hunter Biden's shady business dealings in Ukraine. Vice President Biden then insisted that the prosecutor be removed from office. And he said if the prosecutor wasn't removed from office, he would withhold $1 billion in Ukraine aid. Now, Ukraine pushed back on this and they said, you don't have the power to do that. And Joe Biden said, I'll call Barack right now and show you that we're going to keep that aid unless you fire the prosecutor who's looking into my son. Does all that sound like a conspiracy theory? I know it does. It does sound like a conspiracy theory. Fortunately, you don't need to take my word for it. Joe Biden actually bragged about doing this exact thing at the Council on Foreign Relations. If you enjoyed that video, and honestly, even if you didn't, please be sure to hit the like button so that everyone knows that our content is the best content out there.